Queen of Night, bearing the scientific name Tulipa gesneriana, is the closest any cultivated tulip has come to a true black flower, its petals reaching a maroon so deep they absorb rather than reflect light. Botanically, it belongs to the single late group, producing tall cup-shaped blooms on rigid stems with coloration driven by unusually dense anthocyanin concentrations, the same pigments responsible for the depth of red cabbage and dark berries. Dutch breeders released it in 1944 during the German occupation of the Netherlands at the height of what historians call the Hunger Winter. That a near-black luxury cultivar entered commercial trade while a population faced starvation tells you how completely tulip culture had threaded itself into Dutch economic identity. Standing before it in full bloom, the stillness of the flower is almost architectural. Photographs consistently fail to capture the actual depth. In cut flower markets, it commands steady premium pricing year-round. Almost no viable seed sets from this variety. Every bulb sold today is a vegetative clone of original wartime-era stock, meaning every Queen of Night in every garden carries an unbroken biological line back to a country under occupation. The Emperor series, scientifically known as Tulipa fosteriana cultivars, carries genetics from a completely different world. These tulips descend from wild Central Asian species, mountain tulips native to the highland steppes of Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, selected for enormous blooms on short, sturdy stems that resist the cold and wind of early spring. The goblet-shaped flowers reach up to 12 centimeters across and were bred to open in conditions that collapse most early cultivars. Bringing Fosteriana genetics into mainstream European horticulture connected wild mountain species to cultivated garden forms in a direct bloodline, a lineage most gardeners never consider when they plant one in autumn. The petals carry a waxy, almost lacquered surface that catches low spring light with sculptural intensity, more solid-looking than floral. Emperor cultivars are among the most reliably perennial tulips in commerce, naturalizing readily in well-drained soil and returning each spring without lifting. The parrot tulip, whose scientific name is Tulipa gesneriana, produces flowers with petals deeply lacerated, twisted, and feathered at the edges, sometimes streaked with contrasting color across a single bloom. These forms are not damage. They result from a mutation in petal edge development that breeders first isolated in 17th century Holland. The parrot group emerged directly from tulip mania, the speculative bubble of the 1630s when unusually formed bulbs changed hands for prices equivalent to Amsterdam canal houses. Historians now treat that market as one of the earliest documented financial speculation events in European economic history. Held close, a parrot tulip carries a faint sweetness, and the ruffled petal edges cast layered shadows into the flower's interior that vary through the day as the light angle shifts. Floral designers prize the group for structural drama and a long, reliable vase life. Parrot tulips bloom among the latest in the tulip calendar, extending the garden season deep into May in temperate climates. The petal mutations that define them occasionally revert to smooth edges in individual blooms, a reminder that the feature we bred for was always something the plant did by accident. Angelique, classified by botanists as Tulipa gesneriana, is a double-late tulip so densely petaled it has been compared to a peony more often than to anything else in the tulip family. The layering, sometimes 30 or more petals per bloom, results from a mutation that converts stamens and pistils into additional petals, a process called petalidy. Developed in the Netherlands in the 1950s, Angelique was bred specifically for the cut flower trade, where its long vase life and soft pink coloration made it commercially dominant within a decade of release. The scent is genuinely floral, rare in modern tulips, which were largely bred for visual effect at the expense of fragrance. In soft light, the pale shell pink outer petals take on a translucent, almost luminous quality. Angelique has remained one of the highest volume tulip bulbs sold globally for over 60 years, a commercial longevity that almost no other tulip cultivar has matched. Persian pearl, known to science as Tulipa humilis, is a miniature species, tulip, from the mountain slopes of Iran and Turkey, part of the wild ancestry from which all cultivated tulips ultimately descend. Reaching barely 15 centimeters tall, it produces star-shaped magenta pink flowers with a bright yellow center, opening flat in full sun and closing tight at night. Its naturalization capacity is exceptional. It establishes in poor, stony, well-drained soil where larger hybrids fail entirely, and returns reliably each spring without intervention. Flowering early, sometimes pushing through late snow, it represents what tulips look like before centuries of breeding changed them into something the original plant would not recognize. Rembrandt, recorded in botanical literature as Tulipa gesneriana, carries a history unlike any other ornamental flower. The celebrated broken tulips, white or yellow petals flamed and feathered with red or purple streaks that drove tulip mania in the 1630s, were not a breeding achievement. They were diseased. The dramatic color breaking was caused by tulip-breaking virus, a mosaic virus transmitted by the peach potato aphid, and every admired broken tulip in Dutch Golden Age painting was a terminally ill plant being slowly killed by infection. The virus was not identified until the 20th century. Botanically, infected bulbs weaken with each propagation cycle. The streaking intensifies precisely as the plant declines. Modern Rembrandt cultivars reproduce similar color patterns through stable genetic selection without the virus. Standing before one in full bloom, the markings across each petal look hand-painted, which is exactly why Dutch artists used infected specimens as still life models for generations. The tulip-breaking virus still circulates in old heirloom collections worldwide, meaning contaminated bulbs continue spreading it silently. The water lily tulip, scientifically known as Tulipa kaufmanniana, is the earliest tulip to bloom in temperate gardens, sometimes opening in late winter, weeks before any other species emerges from the ground. Native to the Tian Shan Mountains of Central Asia, it evolved at high elevation, where a narrow growing window made early flowering a survival requirement, not a horticultural virtue. Botanically, Kaufmanniana tulips produce wide, nearly flat flowers that open almost horizontal in full sun, petals reflexing at the tips. The geometry that inspired the water lily comparison and gives the bloom a silhouette unlike any other tulip form. The species was introduced to European horticulture by Russian botanists in the late 19th century, fundamentally expanding what cold climate gardens understood early spring to contain. The flowers carry a bicolored interior, creamy yellow inside, red flushed outside, a detail that disappears entirely when viewed from standing height and only reveals itself at ground level. Established Kaufmanniana colonies in well-drained soil can persist for decades without human intervention, making it one of the truest perennials among all garden tulips. The Darwin hybrid, bearing the scientific name Tulip Darwin hybrid group, is the engineering achievement of mid-20th century Dutch horticulture, a deliberate cross between cultivated Darwin tulips and wild Fosteriana species, designed to produce the largest possible bloom on the strongest possible stem. Dirk Lefebvre first achieved the cross in the 1940s, and his cultivar Apeldoorn remains one of the best-selling tulips on earth. Botanically, Darwin hybrids produce flowers of unusual structural integrity, thick waxy petals, stems reaching 70 centimeters, blooms up to 12 centimeters across, dimensions that required methodical selection rather than chance. During post-war economic recovery, they became the commercial backbone of Dutch bulb exports, reaching American and British suburban gardens at the precise moment mass home gardening was expanding. Standing before a mass planting in full bloom, the visual scale is physical. The flowers are large enough to register in peripheral vision. Darwin hybrids are among the most reliably perennial large tulips in commerce, often returning for 5 or more seasons from a single planting.